I'm Carrie Bourne. I'm from the Office of Continuing Education at UW Whitewater. We host the Fairhaven Lecture Series each semester, and this semester we've been talking about performance and entertainment in our world today, and our lecture today certainly is a great finale in that topic. Today's presenter is Glenn C. Hayes. He's in his 29th year as Director of Bands at UW Whitewater. He conducts the Symphonic Wind Ensemble, Chamber Winds, University Band, and the Warhawk Marching Band. Dr. Hayes' teaching areas include conducting, music education, wind literature, and marching band techniques. Under his guidance, the UW Whitewater Band Program has received regional, national, and international acclaim for excellence in performance in both concert hall and on the marching field. The Symphonic Wind Ensemble has performed by invitation at conventions of the British Association of Symphonic Bands and Wind Ensembles, College Band Directors National Conference, and the Music Educators National Conference. On February 20th, 2013, Dr. Hayes led the Symphonic Wind Ensemble in a performance at Carnegie Hall to great acclaim, the first Wisconsin University band to perform at the legendary hall. That performance led to an invited performance at the Symphony Center in Chicago as the featured ensemble for the 2014 International Music Festival. This past spring saw the ensemble touring to Salzburg, Vienna, and Prague, receiving enthusiastic ovations at each performance venue. Please welcome Dr. Glenn Hayes.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you so much for coming. Can everyone hear me okay? Sure. Okay. Well, kind of divided it into four categories today. An introduction, how did it get built? The category I call it, you're going to do what? And then our family's experiences at Carnegie Hall, because I always like to hear personal experiences as well when dealing with the structure. So, you know what it is, and you know where it is. Let me ask this, and even though the lights are out, you can raise your hands. Who has actually seen physically, in person, Carnegie Hall? Wonderful, okay. How many of you have attended an event there? Okay, fewer. And has anyone performed there? Well, no, I mean, you never know because the hall is incredibly busy. It really is. So let's get started. How did it get built? It was actually, the spark was a confrontation between two German violinists in New York at the same time in the late 19th century. First, in this corner, Theodore Thomas, on your left. In 1845, he arrived in New York City at the age of 10 and immediately began performing around the city on his violin. He played in a lot of groups, but he really disliked what he called the popular repertoire, the operetta sort of things and songs. He wanted something else. So he formed his own orchestra, and they toured and they played the music he wanted them to play. Beethoven, Brahms, Mozart. He even performed music of a couple of his friends, one of whom had the name of Richard Wagner and Anton Rubinstein. By the 1870s, he was the top musical force in the United States. No one had more pull, more authority, or shall we say more influence / control than Theodore Thomas. In this corner, with more facial hair, Leopold Damrosch. Leopold arrived in New York City in 1871, when of course Thomas was hitting the peak of his influence. And he arrived with his two sons, Walter and Frank. Damrosch also wanted to be a major musical figure, but Mr. Thomas had no interest in acquiescing any of his power or authority to anyone. So Mr. Damrosch, Leopold, was also friends with Anton Rubinstein and went to Anton and said, I want to have some influence, I want to make something happen here, but Theodore Thomas controls the town. What should I do? Rubinstein very calmly said, form your own group. So he did. So in 1873, Leopold Damrosch formed the Oratorio Society of New York. 5 years later, in 1878, he had enough influence to form the Symphony Society of New York. So you can see that the game is on now. There was another issue driving the problem, is that there were not many performance spaces of any size in New York City. The Metropolitan Opera House, but they were preoccupied with this thing called opera, and so open dates were few and far between. The next option were the auditoriums owned by the piano manufacturers, which, as you can imagine, would not be very large at all because they were built for piano recitals. Also, at this point in time, more and more European orchestras and opera companies discovered they had huge audience pull over here. They could make a lot of money if they got on the ship, came over, hit New York, Baltimore, D.C., even start coming to the far west of the United States called Chicago. It's also this time, many of you will know, that the opera houses were built in the late 19th century. Stoughton, which if you've not seen the Stoughton Opera House, you need to. It's gorgeous. Woodstock also survives, and they are beautiful. But for a major European orchestra, they're pretty small for a full symphony. So we have Walter Damrosch with his orchestra, and we're not talking like Lawrence Welk, we're talking full symphony orchestras here. And senior moment. Thank you, Theodore Thomas. I knew that. Yeah. Thank you, Marion. Okay. So how is this going to get resolved? His name is not fate. But Leopold died in 1885 and willed his position and his baton to his 23-year-old favored son, Walter. If you look at Walter, you're thinking 1923. He always has those Gatsby looks, doesn't he? He was handsome, he was ambitious, he was intelligent, which combined to get him many, many invitations into the most influential and wealthiest homes in New York City. If they had a big party, they wanted Walter there. Subsequently, he set out to find a donor to build a concert hall in New York City at the age of 23. In April of 1887, Louise Whitfield, on your right, accepted a wedding gift from her husband, Andrew Carnegie. It was a mansion on Fifth Avenue next to the Vanderbilts. Yeah, not bad neighborhood. We're talking 1887. Andrew Carnegie had a fortune valued then at $15 million. Well, they got married. Andrew and Louise sailed to a honeymoon in Scotland at one of Andrew's estates. You'll never guess who happened to be on that same ship. Yeah, Walter Damrosch. He was going over to study with Hans Bülow, the famous German conductor. Well, as I said, he was intelligent, he was handsome, he was charismatic. He became friends with the Carnegies to the point where Carnegie invited Walter to visit him in Scotland. They became great friends. Andrew and Walter would ride around the grounds and talk this, talk that, talk concert hall. By the end of the visit, Andrew Carnegie had agreed to give up to $2 million, or 90% of the cost of a concert hall. Yeah, Walter was good. Walter was really, really good. But please note, the first name was the Music Hall. It was not Carnegie Hall, it was the Music Hall. That's how Andrew wanted it to happen. We all know location is important. Andrew could have purchased land anywhere he wanted to, but obviously the man was also quite the visionary. He bought property way outside in the west suburbs. Okay? It was on a dirt road at the edge of a place called Goat Hill. There were farms across the street. Didn't even have indoor plumbing out there yet. But he said, no, this will be the place where we're going to build this. So they began purchasing land, and of course then they had to find an architect. Enter William Burnet Tuthill, who is, obviously this was taken at the end of his career. Tuthill was, I think, 32 when he got started. How did he get involved? Well, he happened to be a cellist in the Oratorio Society founded by Leopold. Remember Leopold, the dad? And he had become an architect. And he was the treasurer of the Oratorio Society, so he was well known by those folks. And of course, Andrew said, who should we hire for an architect? And Walter says, William Burnet Tuthill. I think he'd do a nice job. So, as an additional acoustical consultant from Chicago, they hired the firm of Adler and Sullivan, names you may recognize from the Chicago area. And Mr. Tuthill, also being very intelligent, thought, I need to go examine the best concert halls in the world. So he went over to Europe, did an extensive tour, notating things, looking at things, etc. But everyone says it's, I can tell you, it's acoustically a phenom, and this was his first major project. He did his homework, and he was also very lucky, as were we all. So remember, Andrew pledged up to $2 million. The actual cost to build Carnegie Hall at the time, $763,531.25. Just about, just barely over $750,000 to build Carnegie Hall. An amazing accomplishment. To me, this one is even more amazing, to be honest. It took less than a calendar year from the laying of the cornerstone to the opening night. Think about that. Those of you that were here, how long did it take Young Auditorium to get built? And I love Young Auditorium. I truly do. It's a remarkable facility. But it's not Carnegie Hall. Just structurally it's not. They made it work. They absolutely made it work. It was not an opening night. Obviously there was. It was an opening 5-day festival starting May 5. The guest of honor, Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky. It's when you start to realize the history of Carnegie Hall that if you're a musician, you step back and go, yeah, that's right. They've been here in this very building. It's like when our tour this year, the Wind Ensemble, we got a tour of Mozart's home. And it was walking into a sacred space for every musician. My students saying, this is the room he was born. I said, yes, that's right. I said, no, this is the room he crawled around on. This is, and it's one of those things. And Carnegie's like that. They had, carriages for the opening night, and every opening concert were lined up a quarter of a mile, dropping people off. The reviews after the first concert, I think from all the ones I've read, this one sums it up the best. Tonight, the most beautiful music hall in the world was consecrated to the loveliest of the arts. Possession of such a hall is in itself an incentive for culture. By the way, if you're wondering, Andrew and Louise were in box 33, first tier, center. I was pleased to find that out because when we went to New York, I was part of the adjudication panel for the festival that we were playing, and I sat in that box. I didn't know it was their box at the time, but I thought, great. Part of that is that there was one other piece of furniture in that box that was on the other side of the curtains, closest to the hallway, because in the corner, Andrew had a couch placed. So in case his business of the day tired him out too much, and maybe the concert wasn't quite to his liking, he had a place to take a nap. Is in itself an incentive for culture. Literally, Carnegie Hall allowed for the course of American music to take a new direction. Previous to this, American concert halls had been dominated, and there's nothing wrong with it, but been dominated by German music. Suddenly, French music, Russian music were the new equal partners. Different types of groups began to be recognized. And this has happened from that point forward. The size of the stage could accommodate larger orchestras. They were smart. They built it for the bigger groups. The stage apron can be extended out over the seats to row L for even larger performances. Okay, 1891. Acoustically, it was and it is perfection. If you ever get a chance to go to Carnegie Hall, even get a tour of it, take it, because it defies description. The people who booked it brought in guests, entertainers, always sought the best, and as soon as you performed at Carnegie Hall, they wanted to come back. They absolutely wanted to come back. I'll tell you a quick story. Horowitz, pianist, how many of you know that name? It's a great story on him. He would always travel with his piano. It would be brought out on the stage. He would say, no, move it over there. So they'd move it. Let's try back over here, back over here. Finally, he would find the spot. He said, no, this is where the piano sounds best. So he comes back the next year. Same routine. Comes back the next year, same routine. Finally, some stage manager, after the recital, very quickly goes out, marks it, and puts nails in Carnegie Hall floor where the three legs of the piano were for Horowitz. He said, let's see how good he is. Every year, they'd go through the same routine, and every year, without his knowledge of those nails being there, the piano legs would end up within 1/4 inch of the piano legs. Those are ears. The other thing you may not know is that there were and are 3 distinct performance spaces at Carnegie Hall. From the outset, there was the main stage of Music Hall, and that's now called Stern Hall, Isaac Stern Hall. The Chamber Music Hall, which is the viol recital hall. The viols gave a lot of money. It's not Kurt Weill, the German composer. And there's a lower level recital hall called Zankel Hall. The 3 halls now named for the people who were most influential in the saving of Carnegie Hall. I could go on with firsts, but these are just a few during the first year. Okay, opened May 5, 1891. The first children's concert was December 30th of that same year. Bernstein didn't start this trend, and I love Bernstein. But the first performance by an African-American performer, April and May of 1892. Yeah, that's pretty revolutionary. Carnegie Hall is not afraid of being revolutionary. They are not afraid of innovation. They only care about one thing: quality of music making. January 23rd, John Philip Sousa and his ensemble. Quite probably the first band to play there. Also that same year, the Music Hall Board voted to change the name of Music Hall to Carnegie Hall. Chicago came over in 1898. If you know your Chicago Symphony history, you may know that the person who founded the Chicago Symphony Orchestra was a man by the name of Theodore Thomas. Competition got a little too hot for him in New York, and since Walter got the music hall built, he thought, fine, I'll go start another symphony. January 31, 1901, a young Winston Churchill delivered a lecture there. And I know a lot of you will know the name Pablo Casals, one of the premier musicians of all time. His premiere was in 1904, February. And it just goes on from there. We had a treasure. We had this remarkable treasure. Carnegie Hall is to performance space as Aaron Copland is to American composition. I'm sorry, you're going to do what? 1925, Robert E. Simon bought the building for $1,850,000. During the Depression, the number of rentals of offices and studios in the building dropped dramatically. He thought about tearing it down. Enter his son, Robert Simon Jr. He said, I'm sorry, but that building is just too unprofitable. My stockholders are unhappy. We need to tear it down and sell the land. It's prime land by this point in history, and there were a lot of people wanting to buy it. Plans ranged from turning it into a fire engine red skyscraper to making it a parking lot. Obviously, the people of New York were protesting this. There were lots of groups formed, but nothing caught fire, nothing whatsoever. So Simon says, hey, by mid-1960, it's gone. Fortunately, in late December of 1959, Jacob Kaplan, his wife Alice, and the legendary violinist Isaac Stern had a meeting to discuss the fate of Carnegie Hall. Stern convinced Kaplan of the value, and he contacted just a couple of his friends, a couple of people he knew, to meet with Stern. That group came together on February 7, 1960. It's a very diverse group called the Citizens Committee for Carnegie Hall. Now, how was it diverse? They had people from labor, people from music, people from law, people from banking, people from the press. They had youth. They had Democrats, Republicans, and a mix of racial and religious backgrounds. The problem was they thought they could just have it protected via urban renewal, but the area was not available for urban renewal. And it couldn't happen politically either, they believed, because, control your reactions, there was a Republican state government and a Democratic city government, and the two didn't work together well. Next slide. But, remember they had lawyers? Lawyers can always find this. If there's a lawyer in the house, I apologize, but you chose the profession. The Baird Act allowed for the state to save significantly historical buildings if the right conditions were met, but they didn't meet Carnegie Hall. But if they could get the Baird Act amended so that cities could have the same authority to take over historically significant buildings, it could work. And those are the people they had to deal with. Nelson Rockefeller's family had just given millions for the building of Lincoln Center, where the New York Philharmonic moved from Carnegie Hall. Fortunately, the Citizens Committee, remember I said they had the press? Yeah, okay. Daily stories came out. They also had the promise, they were promising a new professional symphony. You think, well, they've got the New York Phil. New York Phil was being trashed at that point in time, in the early 60s. Oh, Leonard Bernstein was just, one reviewer said, we need a professional symphony with a professional conductor, not someone standing in front of people playing instruments who does pirouettes on the podium. Oh yeah, it was like, woo. It was wicked. They also said, we promise affordable culture here in New York, because tickets had just skyrocketed. They said, we will make this the People's Hall. The other side pushed back. Mr. Simon and Simon Management planned a Carnegie Hall farewell for May 20, 1960, as the hall would be torn down on starting June 1. The countdown begins. March 31st, Governor Rockefeller signed the amendment allowing the city of New York to, quote, acquire by condemnation any property with special historical or aesthetic interests. That's March 31, okay? April 1st, a telegram was delivered to the mayor of New York, signed by every big name in music you could think of, pleading with him to save Carnegie Hall. April 28, the New York City Department of Real Estate authorized the acquisition of Carnegie Hall. And on May 16th, the papers were signed. 4 days before the farewell concert, 2 weeks before the start of destruction. They cleaned the place up, new coat of paint, gala reopening. Tuthill came over from Lincoln Center, Bernstein conducted, but this is a great one. Isaac Stern, 2 days before, had been in Lucerne, Switzerland playing. He was the one that just drove this machine. He flew back, had a couple hours sleep, went into a board meeting, went into rehearsal, and then just chose to sit in the hall for a couple hours. That night, with Bernstein conducting, he played the Beethoven violin concerto, but so passionately he broke a string. At the conclusion of that, the crowd jumped up, cheered, applauding. And for the first time ever, and only time ever, Isaac Stern broke down on stage. And who could blame him? Because the hours of work, the energy, the convincing, the pleading, the belief at its very core that this space was worth saving. And now you know why it's called Isaac Stern Hall, or stage, Isaac Stern Stage at Carnegie Hall. It was named after him. So now we get to that part of the talk today that has the personal stories. And yes, how did the Hayes family get to Carnegie Hall? Well, for one of them, it was practice, practice, practice. Unbeknownst to anybody, Carnegie Hall has one night a year of collegiate honors recital. And they present it the opportunity to a university that has an exemplary music program. Proud to say that 2012-13 season, it went to the University of Arizona where our daughter was a harp performance major in her junior year. Every studio was allowed to put one person up from that studio, so we had about 38. There was a judging panel performance by 10 of the faculty from the University of Arizona to make sure it was as fair as possible. 10 finalists were selected from the 38. At which point then, 2 weeks later, representatives from Carnegie Hall came out. And it was a formal recital. After all 10 played, they took them off stage and said, okay, we're going to take you back out on stage and we're going to announce the 4 names. Please maintain your composure, whether you are selected or not. And then don't forget, you are required to attend the reception following the announcement. So think about that. We're going to put you on stage, but we may not call your name, but you cannot cry, and if your name is called, you cannot cheer. Now, how do we know this? A guy by the name of Lynn Binney, some of you know him? Yes. You know he's from Tucson? His sister still lives there. His sister, who raised 4 sons. We connected with Lynn and his sister Carol when we went out there, and she just adopted Lauren. It's like, I've got a daughter for 4 years, I'll take it, okay? Carol was in the audience texting Christine, my wife. She played really well. Okay. Well, they're coming back on stage, and that's the last word we heard. And we think, so we're waiting. And we're hearing nothing. We're not hearing from Lauren. We're not hearing from Carol Johnson. And we're thinking, okay, she made the finals. That's great. I mean, she's an undergrad, for crying out loud. U of A is a Tier 1 school. They have doctorates in performance. Well, about 12:15, the phone rings. I see it's Lauren's cell phone number on the ID. I look at Christine. I said, "Do you want to take it?" She said, "Yeah, let me take it." I hear Christine say, "Hi, Lauren. How are you doing?" 3 seconds later, my wife goes into hysterics. And I'm thinking, I think it's soundproof enough. We have police officers living next door to us. Something. And I said, just took the phone. I said, "I take it you're going to New York?" And all I could hear my daughter say was, "I'm going to New York. I'm going to New York." I said, "Yes, we've established that. Good, okay." And Lauren, I'm proud to say, was one of the 4. The other 3 were all second-year doctoral students, 2 in piano and 1 in voice. But this is the playbill outside Carnegie Hall, because I know a lot of you have seen Lauren play harp, right? And know of her. That's the entrance to Weill Hall. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous space. In the dressing room beforehand, getting ready to go out. This is a picture of Weill Hall. You're really not supposed to take photos in there, but somehow Christine's phone kept snapping shots. I don't know how that happened. Including this one during a warm-up. It was a rented harp from New York, but exquisite instrument. And it was great because my daughter's playing harp. I don't have to move the harp. There are stagehands. In fact, I couldn't if I wanted to. They're union stagehands. Wonderful people. This was after the performance. Her harp teacher was fighting cancer at the time, couldn't be there, but sent yellow roses because when her harp teacher debuted at Carnegie Hall, her father sent her a dozen yellow roses. She wanted to continue. And this is a reception. They had a reception at the NOLA recording studios, extremely famous in New York, one of the first recording studios there, and Carole King cut her demos there. Duke Ellington recorded there, Basie, all the great jazz rock artists. It's up on the top of the Steinway building. It's a remarkable space. But you may notice, there he is, our very own Lynn Binney. You may recognize Chuck Taylor, who also flew in. Carol Scheringer. This is Lauren's roommate from Arizona who lived in New Jersey and was home for winter break, went home early so she'd come up and hear her roommate play. Lindsay Van Norman, who's a Whitewater High grad that was living in New York at the time. And each of them got a framed poster of their performance. It was a remarkable trip. I was so thankful for all the support of the people there. And I can still feel my wife's hand on my hand as our daughter walked out onto that stage. And no bones were broken. But let me tell you, it was pretty intense. So, excuse me. That was in December of 2012. Now that just came up, in October, whereas our trip had been planned for some time. Actually, what happened was when we played the International Wind Band Festival in Manchester, England, the group that runs the New York Wind Band Festival heard us, and they had invited us a couple of the times, but the stars just weren't aligning for us. But they called in 2011. They said, "Would you please come in 2012 and be the featured ensemble?" And I thought about, okay, who's going to be coming in 2013, or in 2012? That would be there for 2013. I felt pretty good about it. I said, "No, but how about the spring of 2013?" They said, "Okay." So that's how it happened. The campus supported us at the same level as any of the national championships teams, and I'm so proud of that. I have colleagues who can't believe that. But then Chancellor Telfer and the student government covered the cost of the trip for the students. They only had to pay for their meals. SWE? Symphonic Wind Ensemble. The Symphonic Wind Ensemble. We call ourselves SWE, SWE. Stands for Symphonic Wind Ensemble. We did some research. We found out we were going to be the first Wisconsin University band to ever perform at Carnegie Hall. And looking at all the other groups, we were the first one of our size, the first only undergraduate ensemble. Most of the time, University of Florida's played this, University of Louisville, they all have doctoral programs and performances, or a couple schools that have masters. We were strictly undergrads, and we're mainly a music education school. So we held auditions the first week of September 2012, and the quest began. I asked my dear friend and colleague, Christian Ellenwood, to write a piece for us, because I couldn't find anything else to fit the program that I really liked that would work. I had the program all picked, but except for we needed something slow and beautiful, and Christian's music is incredible at that. And I just jumped a page. Yep, there we are. We had some pretty intense months because I kept saying, look, we're playing Carnegie Hall. This is not Young Auditorium. This is not, going out on high school tours. This is the premier performance site in the world for concert ensembles. They had sectional, students did things outside, studio faculty helped prep, because when we came back from break, we would only have 8 rehearsals left. Okay? I didn't sleep well over break. And it's not because I don't trust my students, but there's always that, I just hope everyone's practicing, because it was a reasonably large group. On Saturday the 16th, late afternoon, we had a rehearsal. Everybody went back, ate dinner, a lot of families were up. And then that evening, we boarded the bus. People said, you're busing it to Carnegie Hall? I said, it's about the same distance as going to Salem, Virginia, and a lot of us have been there many times. I said, the difference is when we go to Salem, we go on the bus all night, we play a football game, get on the bus, and come back all night. We get to go all night, stay in a hotel for a few days, then come back. We also then stopped at East Stroudsburg State University in Pennsylvania. A colleague there I got to know through CBDNA. He allowed us to rehearse there on Sunday afternoon because we had to arrive in New York on Sunday evening. Funny small world story, that gentleman left East Stroudsburg State and is now the director of bands at this little place called Mount Union University. Here we are, getting ready to go. And that, of course, is Christian Ellenwood. This was at a rehearsal. He was looking at the score of his piece. So, we got in Sunday night. Monday was just a basic acclimation to New York City. We had a brief rehearsal, and we got to have an evening dinner cruise, which was just so much fun in a dance. We just had the best time. Tuesday morning, we had a rehearsal, then free time. That evening, students went to a variety of shows, everything from The Lion King to the New York City Ballet, and I judged bands that night, which was fine. This is our playbill, which I'm very proud to say the festival people gave to us, and it's in my office. It's about 6.5 feet tall. Performance day. It was we had breakfast, we had free time, we had a sound check, so the first time we went into the hall. I asked Lance Leipold, my dear friend, I said, when you take a group into a new space, that's very important, what do you do? He said, give them time to look around. I said, Lance, I only have 25 minutes for sound check. He said, trust me on this. Give them 2 minutes and say, this is Carnegie Hall, look around. Look up top, tell them where to look, and say, okay, now that's done. It's a performance space. It's a place where people give concerts, which is what we're here to do. I did that. It worked like a charm. But Lance knows what he's talking about. By the way, when you're on stage, you don't touch anything. The stagehands are incredibly friendly. I could not adjust my own stand height. It's a stagehand rule. And they were so good because I'm pretty particular. I loved Mark the Bird Fidrich, if you know baseball, who would sculpt the mound with his hands. I'm kind of that way too with the seating setup. They did everything. You just don't know anything. After that, the ensemble was taken to the large group waiting area, and I was given the maestro suite. I was out of my head. I come up, I see this. It's a 3-room suite. You walk in, and that's a bust of Toscanini. I sat in this room for half an hour absorbing the energy, thinking of everyone who had been at that desk or touched that piano. And there's just this line, I think that's George Zell over there, Fritz Reiner, all the great conductors. I mean, even, there's that room, there's a dressing room, there's a bathroom, and every room you just have just one line of pictures, and it's like, it's the Hall of Fame. I still have that Maestro Suite sign in my office, too. In fact, I made 3 copies and put it at my door when we got back. It was fun. The ensemble went on stage. We were introduced. They played from their souls. They absolutely played from their souls. I talked to Lynn, and going to give to Fairhaven, we were able to make a CD on return. And this has our introduction and then the 4 pieces we played. Rocky Point Holiday by Ron Nelson, If Ever There Is Tomorrow by Kristen and Ellenwood, Molly on the Shore by Percy Granger, and the finale to the Myslenka 8th Symphony. At which point the sound was so, not loud, but huge. And you know what I mean by that. It was just so filling. The floor was vibrating. I remember giving the cutoff. There was about 2 seconds of reverb, and then I just remember the sound coming up from the audience. It was just so thrilling. And the great thing is that then Provost Copper and then Dean McPhail came out to New York to hear the concert, because this was history. The first Wisconsin band, but UW Whitewater to have the chance to play at Carnegie Hall by invitation. That's what it looked like from the back during our warm-up. I had to take a picture of it was cheaper, and I paid for this myself, to fly Lauren out from Tucson to play than to hire a New York harpist to play with us. Yeah, seriously, it was. It was unbelievable. And she could tell you that's a very special harp. There are only 5 of them in the world. But I just, to have her in the ensemble was a thrill beyond belief. And that's Provost Copper and Dean McPhail talking to us. Thursday, we needed that day to decompress. We were free until 7 p.m. Most of us did lots of walking around. We went to the Museum of Modern Art, the MoMA, and then on the bus and back home. We arrived about noon. People were out from the building. They saw us coming, came out and applauded us. The concert of a lifetime in the most perfect concert hall in the world. And that is the Symphonic Wind Ensemble warming up at Carnegie Hall. That's what it looks like. So, do take it from me. All the world's a stage, and that's a view you never forget. But there is only one Carnegie Hall. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you. Well, I wore my tails today because this is what I wore on stage, and when we talk about Carnegie Hall, I think it should be authentic. You may notice, you probably can't see it, but I have a lapel pin. One of the students bought for me, and the only time it leaves this set of tails is if I put it on my tux or if this is going to the cleaners. Because I am I want to remember this, as I always will forever, but I'm very, very, very proud of this, that we had that accomplishment. And the reason we got the Chicago performance was because the feature group canceled out. So they called me in October, and they said, would you be willing to come down? You're our first call. The reviews from the administration of the organization were just stellar. And I said, well, let me find out. Campus just spent a lot of money on us. I got the proposal via email early Thursday morning. I saw Mark McPhail about 8:30. I said, can I talk to you for a minute? He said, sure. I showed him the proposal. He said, this would be good for us, wouldn't it? I said, well, it would be good for us. It's a little sudden, etc. He said, let me make a couple phone calls. I'll get back to you. He hunted me down 2 hours later and said, the provost says, make it happen. It's covered. I'm going, okay. First thing I did, go down and knock on Myung Hee Chung's door. If you know her, our senior piano faculty, and said, would you be willing to play Rhapsody in Blue with the Symphonic Wind Ensemble at Symphony Center in Chicago? She looked at me and smiled. She said, that would be fun. So we played a very different program there because it was a very different group. As every year it is, every semester. So, but are there any questions about Carnegie Hall? before I retire.
What is the capacity?
Oh, that's a good question. I really don't know. I'd guess close to 2,000. The main floor was pretty well full. So, but you have to understand, those three halls, you can go to their website. There are many, many nights. They have 3 events going on, one on each stage. And the other night, the Bavarian State Orchestra was playing on the Stern stage. The Kronos Quartet was in Weil, and there was a solo vocalist down in Zankel. I'm going, that's nuts. And yet, it's Carnegie Hall. Also, they don't worry about parking. There's no parking ramp. Subway, bus, taxi, chauffeur. But yeah, it was. I don't think many of my students actually slept Wednesday night. I think just they were so pumped. It took so much for the adrenaline to leave them. Yeah.
Well, how was your concert promoted so that you had the audience there?
Our concert was promoted by the Playbill and by all the advertisements, including on the internet, for the New York Wind Band Festival. We were listed as a feature ensemble. The question was, how was our concert promoted? And I know there were corporations. This is very common. For Lauren's recital, it was sold out, but the hall was probably about 3/4 full. Is that fair to say? Yeah. The corporations buy tickets, give them to employees or other people as well, pass them around. But yeah, it was fun because it was in the little. You go into your hotel room, and they hit events happening in New York City, and this Carnegie Hall. It's like, there we are. Yeah, we were in Playbill, but that's the organization doing that. So yeah.
You happen to know what young Mr. Simon is doing these days?
No, and may he rest in peace, and never try and bring down another building. I have no idea what he's doing now. Yeah.
Have you played Orchestra Hall in Chicago?
Yes, and
Is there a difference between that and Carnegie Hall?
yes, and just so when I said Symphony Center, that is Orchestra Hall. When they remodeled it a little bit, they renamed it. Yeah, that it's how people do things these days, right? We have this the Stern stage in Carnegie Hall on who knows whose block. I mean, it's kind of gets ridiculous time, but yeah, Symphony Center. Carnegie seemed more intimate acoustically. I could hear every single note, which at the time our rehearsal space was very, very small. In fact, we would change things up just to get the ears completely different, so the students have to hear something and adjust immediately to the balance that we wanted. We would go into Young as often as possible and open it up as much as we could for acoustical. Whereas when we went to Symphony Center, if you've been there, they have those risers. And those risers are built in. And having been there, I thought, okay, how are we going to handle this? I went to the then tech director, David Neese, at Young Auditorium, with a picture. I said, can you recreate this with your risers, please? He said, let me see what I can do. And we had a rehearsal schedule. We walk in, and he had it as close as you'd ever want a mock-up for Symphony Center, which was great for the students because we're used to rehearsing on a level floor and performing on a level floor. You don't do that at Symphony Center. You have the front row, and then you have the next people 8 inches up, and the third row is 16 inches up, and the percussion are at the back over everybody. It's a real challenge. So, yes?
How do you attract so many talented students at what we would say would be a relatively small school compared to many other larger? Do you recruit them?
We do recruit. That's one of the things. I find it implausible that coaches and band directors too often don't get along. They don't. Bob Brezowitz, Lance Leipold, Kevin Bullis, we've all been very, very dear friends, a lot of the assistant coaches too, because we all go for position players. If you don't have a tuba, it's tough. If you don't have the double reeds, it's tough. And the quality literature is written for a full ensemble. So, well, to be honest, I'm flattered by your comment. I'm very proud to say that UW Whitewater has an incredible reputation and has really grown, I'd say, the past 12 years at excellence throughout the campus. Kind of started through the athletic program. The state, one example for our own music department, the State of Wisconsin Music Education Association presents every year an Outstanding Music Ed Senior Award at the college level by competitive application. It's been given 25 years, and Whitewater students have received that 16 times. No one's close. No one's close. I work with very talented people who also attract quality students. It's a team effort. We just had our last concert, which we say goodbye to a number of people, and 3 of the people I'd known since they were 9th graders in high school because they would come to our summer band camp. Just try and get them on campus and help them feel comfortable. Going to Carnegie Hall has helped. Every audition day now, Mark had 800 of those CDs created every audition day. Any student we're trying to recruit, we make sure it gets one. This is a sample of the quality of our program. And that's, it's impressive. You're in high school, you say, oh, Carnegie Hall. So, and really hardworking students, to be honest. Really, really hardworking students.
And great leadership.
Well, I don't know about it, but thank you, Bob. Thank you very much. Carrie, I'm not sure what time it is.
Yeah, we would have time for a question or 2 more. Otherwise, we can just end the formal program and you can talk with Dr. Hayes if you'd like after. Does anyone else have just a question or 2?
Marion does.
It's not a question, but I know many of those students because I serve on a committee with them. They're really nice kids.
Oh, they are.
They work hard. They're just really nice people. They'll do well at work.
Oh, they will. Yeah. Just so you all know, Lynn said probably at the outset, and Carrie, you'll want to know this too probably, or Brian, at the outset the CD will be kept at the reception desk because there's no mechanism currently. So if you want to check it out. I will say be careful. At the end of the Ms. Lanka, I mentioned the sound was just, it was this life force, just incredible. After I handed them out the next morning, I had conducting class, a couple people came in and said, we listened to the CD, and I heard someone else say, yeah, we did too. Now our speakers buzz. Well, don't have to listen that loudly. So, but it's been a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. So,
One question back here.
Yeah. Yep.
I have an acquaintance who was visiting New York, and he ran into some people who were also newcomers. I guess they were Japanese students. And he got set up with a question. You just wouldn't believe whatever occurred to him. They wanted him to tell them how to get to Carnegie Hall. So he had to use a line you used earlier, practice.
I have a couple of students that bought that T-shirt. On the front it just says practice, 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 and the back says Carnegie Hall. By the way, this is they're celebrating their 125th year. It's Carnegie Hall.
Thank goodness it wasn't torn down.
Yeah, missed it by 3 weeks. So as I said, what's Mr. Simon doing? I could honestly care less. Yeah, he's not on my card list, I can tell you that. So, well, thank you so much for coming. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.